with fill light, keep in mind sometimes, not always, but sometimes adding a fill light to your scene will actually change the exposure. In other words, it'll add as kind of an additive type process, and sometimes your key light will get a little bit brighter and you have to go back and adjust. So after you make sure that after you added your fill light, that you bring in your gray card and remeter your scene a little bit. Just make sure that everything's the same, or at least if it's changed, that you can adjust for it, and if it hasn't, then you don't need to worry about it. Okay, so you can see right here I've got, just really quickly, we'll pull this off and move it around, but for now I've got it set up right above the camera. It's a little fill light, it's a little 2-foot flow bar here. You can get these at a hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, anywhere like that. Make sure you get an electronic ballast. If you get a magnetic ballast, it will flicker and you'll have to do some really funky stuff with your shutter speed and shutter angle, which may not be available to you on your DSLR. So make sure you get an electronic ballast for your fluorescent light. Those won't flicker as long as you're set to 1/60th. I think they won't flicker. But with 1/50th, they do a very slow strobe. You can't really see. It's not really available to the naked eye, but if you actually fast forward through the footage, you'll see like this scrolling sort of wave of light coming up through your images. It's kind of funky. Anyway, so let's turn this on and let's go from 8:1 to 4:1. And this is for shooting on DSLRs, considering the limited dynamic range that we have. This is my favorite contrast ratio because I can do so much with it in post. I can crush this 8:1, I can crush 16:1 with a power window. Having the fill light directly above the camera like this also creates a really nice eye light. If you look really closely, I don't know, Mark, if you want to zoom in, because I'm not going to be able to zoom in with this camera. In her eye now, we have a highlight on her right side of her eyes, just two little, like a square dots, and then this nice little horizontal line that is in both eyes. It just completely makes her eyes pop. Makes her eyes look bigger, rounder. They call it kind of the doughy-eyed kind of look. It's really great. It's great for your characters because it just sort of gives them a little extra life that they didn't already have. I love it because when I start doing color correction, the first thing that starts to disappear is the highlights and the eyes. So having a really good strong eye light like this will help you, especially when you're doing heavy color correction. You're putting a really heavy look on it to not have the actor's eyes disappear. And of course, she looks lovely. She is very talented. I think we covered. We had the. We talked about your website, right?
Yeah, we got that.
Okay, we got that. So we'll have that on the screen. EliseCantu.com/.org. Okay, so now let's take a look at. Let's adjust the some things you can do with the eye light. So I'm going to pull this off the stand here. You can see I've got a little Cardellini. If you guys don't know what a Cardellini is, this is a little Cardellini clamp here. It's got posts on both ends. They make them with one post. They make them with two posts. It just clamps onto things so that you can put them into C-stands. In this case, I clamped it on the light so I could mount it and hold it while I was talking. But if we want to change from 4:1, I'm not sure we have enough cable here, to 2:1, and if we go back to where we were, we'll get a reading of around 8. Actually, we were back here, weren't we? It's 7 1/3. It's actually a 2 stops difference. And then if we move this in, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it to about, it's going to be about 2:1. So that should be a 1-stop difference. It is. It's a 1-stop difference between that side of her face and this side of her face. That's a 2:1 ratio versus 4:1 where we were. We could even back it off to almost 8:1. And as long as you, Mark, shoot this over here. If you back this eye light all the way up like this, you mount it on something or you sit it on something, we still have an almost 8:1 ratio on her face. But we also still have the great eye light because this light isn't intense enough to actually light her face, but it's still got enough of a highlight to where the fluid on her eyes is able to pick up this highlight and give you a really nice look. So when you hear someone say, I want to put an eye light in there, but I don't want it to affect the shot, this is what you do. You just take a light, either dim it down so that it doesn't affect the exposure on the face, but still gives you a highlight, or just back it way the heck off. So that's our 3-point lighting setup. We've got Rembrandt lighting with a fill light that is adjustable. We can move it in and out. We've got a rim light that doesn't really light her face except when she cocks her head like that, and then we can actually see. No, go ahead, keep it later. Turn it back. You can see it's just a little pretty, sort of kiss of light right there on the cheek. If we wanted to, we could bring that back around and see how it brings out the cheekbone. Actually makes the cheekbone look a little higher, a little more enhanced. So there's different things that we'll talk about as far as technique in altering the way people's faces look, and we'll go back and revisit that at a later time. But let's go ahead and bring Emily in and see what she looks like in the exact same lighting without changing a thing. And to prove that to you, we're just going to have Elise step out and Emily step in. I'm just going to mount this light back up here. And we have a slight problem. And the problem is that Emily's skin is much whiter, brown and white, right? Is much lighter than Elise's skin. So there's a trick to this, and I'll get to it in a second. But for now, let's go ahead and see if we can adjust this. We're getting much more play out of our fill light here. So I'm actually going to turn it off. Okay, Emily, see if you can find your eye line.
Found it.
Okay, great. Okay, now we got 8:1. But you can see because the shape of her face is different, our key light is now actually too far forward. We're actually getting too much light coming across her face on her cheek. So for the sake of time, I'm actually, since I can't move that light any further that way, Emily, cheat your eye line more to the left. A little bit more, right there. And then we'll turn this on, but I'm going to block most of it. And then this should give us about a 4:1. So I'm actually limiting the amount of light that's coming off of this. And we've got the same basic rating, except the exposure is now, instead of a 9 1/3, it's now 10 on the key side. And on the fill side is 8. So we have a 4:1 ratio on her face. She looks great. We got sparkle in her eyes, the hair separation from the background. And all we'd have to do is, I haven't actually checked the exposure on this, but let's go ahead and roll on that. And we can see, so we got the 4:1. If I back out of the way, we've got something more akin to 2:1. And then we'll lose the eye light, but like 8:1 on her face. And if we want to match Elise's, we'd have to poof her hair out a little bit on this side. Elise has very curly hair, which is what we live for. So that's it. You can see that the lighting works for both of them, just slight adjustments. And that's 3-point lighting.